Guys, well, I'm going to introduce Don from GS2, so thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Right. Evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. Very excited to be here today. I want to introduce Kazutomo Niwa, CEO of Game Server Services, otherwise known as GS2. Niwa-san actually is former Nintendo Japan. He was there developing and running the game server operations over at Nintendo for Nintendo and its developers. And in fact, what happened was that he saw an opportunity in the market where there was a big pain point for developers, game developers, which really revolved all around game server operations. And hence, GS2 was born. But he also recognized that there was another opportunity in the market. Actually, there was a big shift that was going on in the market. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the interesting thing is that, I've been working with Niwa-san for about a year now. I myself, 20 years, PlayStation, Sega, EA, and I believe in what he's doing because he's trying to do something that's going to be hopefully really helpful for game developers to make some really awesome games. And back in September, I came here to check out one of Jordan's events, and I was just really amazed by the crowd in the audience, how passionate you guys were about making games. And I told Niwa-san, like, Niwa-san, you got to come here. We've got to do this event because we want to share. We need to share what's going on in game development in Japan. And hopefully, maybe what we share today might be influential for what you guys might think of for this market. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Niwa-san sit down, but just wanted to introduce him, and I'll go ahead and continue with the presentation. All right. So this is his story. So I'm only the guy who's just interpreting his story. A little bit about the market. So I think we all know global games market, huge, right? It's massive. It's practically almost $185 billion. And 50% of that is in mobile. So we're talking about $92.2 billion just in mobile, right? It's 50% of the market itself. And when you think about it from a growth standpoint, of course, thankfully the tide lifts all boats. But particularly in smartphone games, you'll see that there's been growth every year, annually, right? There's 26.8% growth in the compounded annual growth rate, CAGR, as they call it. And so, whereas console and PC, still awesome market. I came from it, so I love it. But it is somewhat flat. And when you look at it from a regional basis, 50%, almost 50% of that market comes from APAC right now. So Asia Pacific market. So that's about 87.9, or really $88 billion that comes from that region. And when you think about the fact that, on a per country basis, the US is still huge, right? It's still at 45 billion? So that's great. It's fantastic. But when you look at it per country, right, of course, China does have the largest market. But the one interesting thing to really point out here is that Japan has 1/10 of that population and makes 26% of that revenue that we're talking about right now. So it makes you wonder, what's going on with Japan? Well, they really love to play games. I mean, we're talking about $149 per person that's spending on games, right? That's how dedicated they are. That's about 65% more than the US. So you got some serious gamers with less of the population that really love their games. And when you look at it now, today, this is really weird to see. But of course in the US, console still dominates, right? And still does great. And mobile is gaining ground. But in Japan, which used to look like the United States, looked exactly like this, now today, it's practically over 90% is mobile, with console being very small right now. So this was a bit of a shock for me to look at. Really? And so the fact is, I wanted to take a deeper look, and we'll see what that meant. I'll go the other way. So what does it look like in the US market for mobile gaming specifically? Well, if you look at the top 25 games, over half of those games are casual games. We're talking about puzzle, casino, right? And again, nothing wrong with it. But again, I think sometimes you think about, is that really more about chance games, or is, where's the skill? Where's that the creativity, perhaps? I mean, there's definitely a lot of creativity. Don't get me wrong. These games are developed, but when you think about graphic fidelity, your skill, how you can really build your skills, character progression, story progression, the deep level games I think we all love to play. Right now in the mobile game market, it's not there right now, which was and this is as of February, beginning of February of this year. The Japan mobile gaming market looks very different. About pretty much half of the games are RPGs. They're pretty gamer focused. It's kind of what you've probably seen when it was very much dominated by console, but now it's all in mobile. And it's diverse. We're talking about sports games, we're talking about RPG, we're talking about definitely puzzle games. There's definitely games like that. There's even a Pokemon type game too, Pokemon Go type game like Dragon Quest Walk. But that's the whole thing. And if you really look at the games, the richness and the quality of the games that they're putting out there is different. Why is that, right? And maybe you might say, like in the US market, those games that you're seeing, the puzzle games, the casual casino games and whatnot, that's not for me. But the reality is when you think about the specs, right? We want to build on high spec devices. But, and if you really think about what's happening mobile, those specs are going up. They're going really high now. That's the quality of games that you can now deliver, right, on iPhone. Or really, it could be Samsung Galaxy 10. So, of course, all of us would probably think, well, but then you think about, well, free to play, it's really hard, how do you really make money and so forth. The fact is, there's this thing that's very common for definitely with the Japanese game developers. They call it the game cycle. And this is the ingredient to their success. Because, their games looked like, casual, it was casino, puzzle, very basic level. But they kept at it, and they kept working and refining this idea of a game cycle. And that's what you see here. I'm sure some of you have seen this. If you built on mobile, you know what this is. You have your main game, you have your character training, you build up, you have your loot box, or what we call gacha in Japan. And maybe at its basics, and you heard a lot of the negative stereotypes and so forth, the reality is this system, whether it's for your hardcore RPG games or your horse training dancing game, they use the same cycle and they do very, very, very well. The reason why is because there's this aspect, what they take is what they call a metagame, right? The game beyond the game. It might sound like an overused word, but the reality is when you look at the games in the US, they primarily focus on the main game. They don't really do what goes around the game to make you want to keep playing. So in Japan, they take the characters and really make sure that whatever, if it's character progression, story progression, whatnot, that goes back into the game. It's not two separate games that you're playing. It's all in one. It affects your main game. So therefore, you're going in and you're enhancing, either you're enhancing your character, you're training your character, putting into some new challenges, and that's, how you create behind that, that's the creativity part, right? That's where all of us here in this room, we want to use our creative strengths to really get people to want to really build up their characters, make them strong enough so that you can progress in the game. When you look at the loot box, again, some people think it's like gambling or maybe you're just totally trying to take people's money. The reality is it's actually the one thing that gives you that daily engagement. It's the one thing that gives you the rewards. If you build it correctly, you get people to find a reason to find, hey, I'll get a bonus character. If I do this right, maybe I'll get a new character so that the characters I've been building, maybe I'm getting a little bored, maybe I want a little bit more freshness, or maybe I want to see if this new character might do something new or introduce something new in the game. That's what the loot box is really for. It's really a mechanism to be able to give you that idea to grow, but at the same time, it allows you to also not let this thing spiral where they just finish the game and they're done and toss it away, right? Giving this everyday basics is what's needed for that, what people may call as loot box. And of course, the free-to-play aspect of it is critical here because it's the aspect of looking at people to come back and play is done with the rewards. But you also look at the fact that when you're training the characters and when you're looking at how much time, right? Usually it takes about maybe a couple weeks to maybe level up, but really, in fact, it takes about a few months. It's like about 3 to 6 months that you do. Why do you need that time? Because you need to build those new scenarios, right? So that you can then continue to get people to play. And this is the game cycle they have. You make sure you have enough time where you're putting your efforts in doing the character training progression. You measure that, right? And you use the different functions to make sure that you're giving your pacing while you build the game. You also use the rewards, right? So get people to keep engaged. And then you finally build your new scenarios, and then you can unlock them and get people to continue playing more and have more fun. So, as I mentioned here, the repetition, that's where the new characters, the new scenarios, that's where you introduce them to continue that great cycle. Because these games, the reason why you see that big growth curve is because those games are not one and done. They keep building on top of each other, right? I mean, again, it sounds familiar to everyone here, but when you look at the US mobile gaming market, why isn't it there? That's my question. In Japan, they've got it down to a science. So how do you do this in a way, right? It's like, oh, but then you have all these network resources, you gotta spend all that time, I gotta get this game to the market, otherwise somebody's gonna beat me. How am I gonna monetize? I'm already spending so much money. Well, see, that's where there is a solution, right? And that solution can be something in the form of what we say is game server services. The reason why we're introducing this here today is because we believe that you shouldn't really be spending your time in that back-end server needs, when you have to go and put all that time. It's a grind. Why would you do that? You want to spend your time developing and making the most awesome game you can with your passion and put all your creativity in that bucket. In Japan, game server services is already used by Bandai Namco, Bandai, Takara Tomy. It's actually been used in mobile games, in arcade games, and so forth. Because in Japan, they didn't really believe in the idea of online functionality. They thought, oh, well, everything has to be local. They were maybe a bit late to the game to actually adopt this, but they were really fast once they figured it out. And so now it's pretty prevalent in Japan now to be using these type of services. In fact, we offer about over 30 different game server functions that you could just immediately apply without needing a game server at all. You just literally just use this. It's a cloud-based service that we use. It's already immediately ready to use. You don't need to operate a server whatsoever. Your initial fixed cost is not there. You just plug it in and you just pay as you go. It is supported on all game platforms, the game engines, of course, and one of our great colleagues is here today to talk about Unreal Engine. And it also supports all the programming languages that I'm sure all of you use. The developer was very happy about the fact that usually it would take about 3 months to get the server in place and then put the programming in place and get the right people in the right place and communication. All that happened. And the fantastic thing is that game server services can just offer those functions. You just plug it in and that'll save you time and money, right? So you can get into the market quickly and get your game out there, and then you can start iterating on your creativity. So bottom line, what we're talking about here is that the mobile game space is about to undergo a creative renaissance. It's not just Japan. It's going to happen here, for sure. That's something that we've definitely seen. Secondly, if you make a robust game with the game cycle in mind, right, and you keep at it, we promise you, your chance of success will be high. And we hope that maybe given the chance, with GS2, maybe we could make your game cycle even easier by offloading the server operations. And then we'll just let you focus on your creativity. So that's what we have for today. So thanks for the time. Jordan, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.